Are we ready? Perfect. Good morning, everybody. I would like to call the September 7th, 2023 APCD hearing board meeting to order. It is, let's see, according to my clock, 1 minute past 9 o'clock in the morning. Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll and swear in any witnesses?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Please note members Powers and Spencers have notified us that they will not be present for today's meeting. Alternate member Engelmann will be participating on behalf of member Powers. All remaining board members are participating in person today. Member Gonzalez,
Present.
member Engelmann,
Present.
member Spencer, Vice Chair Schlick, Chair Rodriguez.
Present.
Thank you. I would ask that the following individuals please raise your right hand or please identify themselves for the record. Hearing board counsel.
Emily Helms, Senior Deputy County Counsel, Counsel for the Hearing Board.
Thank you. I would like to note for the record that Emily Helms, Counsel for the Hearing Board, will be participating remotely for today's meeting. Air Pollution Control District staff.
William Jacks, Chief of Compliance. Dan Plotner, Program Coordinator.
Dave McGee-Hill, Civil Actions Investigator.
Mary Mahoney, Civil Actions Investigator.
Vera Tiagi, counsel for the APCD.
Thank you. I will now swear in those that wish to provide testimony on any item on today's agenda. This includes petitioners, respondents, and APCD staff. Please raise your right hand for the swearing in. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you give in the matter before this hearing board is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I
do.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Oh, no, thank you very much, Madam Clerk. Today, we're going to be addressing the items as presented on the agenda. First of all, we're going to partition them into the public communication aspect of that. So we will, let's see. In this case, we will now move to non-agenda public communication. So this is an opportunity for members of the public to speak to the hearing board on subject matters within the hearing board's jurisdiction, but not an item on today's agenda. So before we proceed, Madam Clerk, have we received any requests from members of the public that wish to address the board today on non-agenda public communication?
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have received no requests from members of the public to provide non-agenda public communication today. However, those members of the public that are joining us via the teleconference line, please dial into the conference number now using the instructions provided on the screen. You may also indicate that you wish to speak on this item by using the raise hand feature at the bottom of the Zoom screen or by pressing *9 now. Madam Chair, seeing no hands raised, there are no members of the public wishing to provide public comment for non-agenda communication for administrative items A today.
Thank you so very much, Madam Clerk. In that case, now let's move on to item B, which is approval of statement of proceedings / minutes for August 10th, 2023. Before we proceed, Madam Clerk, have we received any requests from members of the public that wish to address the board today on administrative item B?
Madam Chair, we have received no members of the public wishing to provide public testimony on administrative item B. However, if there are members of the public on the teleconference line now, you will have an opportunity to speak. You can notify us by dialing into the conference line now using the instructions provided on the screen. You may also indicate that you wish to speak on this item by using the raise hand feature at the bottom of your Zoom screen or pressing #9. Madam Chair, there are no members of the public wishing to provide public testimony for admin item B today.
Thank you so very much. Excuse me. If that is the case, now let's actually move on to comments, from the members of the board on the item B, which are, the statement of proceedings from August 10th. Upon your review, do you have any comments on item B?
I don't have any comments.
That members of APCD, are there any comments, on item B?
No, we don't have any comments.
Okay, well, that is the case. Now with no comments, do we get a motion to approve?
I'll move that we approve the minutes.
Thank you. I mean, then how about a second?
I'll second.
Thank you so very much. Now, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Madam Chair. Member Gonzalez,
Aye.
member Engelmann,
Aye.
member Spencer. Vice Chair Schlick. Chair Rodriguez.
Aye.
Madam Chair, that motion passes with all members of the hearing board voting aye with the exceptions of members Spencer and Vice Chair Schlick who are not present for today's meeting.
Well, thank you so very much. I mean, Madam Clerk, before we move on, I have to appreciate, recognize, I mean, the contributions from all the members present here, APCD, members of the board, respective councils for the fantastic work that has been done regarding updating, I mean, other rules, I mean, hearing board rules. So this has been certainly a labor of love. And sometimes, you know, I mean, but the discussion has been absolutely fantastic. I mean, that's so we have learned from each other how we operate, you know, the new rules of engagement. And I believe that the updates to the rules from the hearing board will benefit, I mean, the public at large, you know, and how we actually do business. So, I mean, that my sincere gratitude on that one. So, and by the way, Emily, thank you so very much, you know, because you're born on the main aspect of, you know, those updates. I don't know how
Oh, I'm
many,
happy to. Thank you.
I'm not gonna ask you how many times you had to listen to those, you know, I mean, audio tapes, so bless you, thank you. Well, I mean, let's actually move on now, I mean, to the petition, I mean, for today's hearing, which is, you know, I mean, the petition 4536 Cornerstone Aggregates Incorporated. Petitioner requests the interim portion of an interim regular variance filed on August 9th, 2023 from APCD Rule 21, specifically conditions 1 and, condition 1. And Rule 12.1 within parentheses E, within parentheses 4, within parentheses I, referring to the certificate of registration, conditions of certificate of registration numbers, APCD 2023-CER-001014 and APCD 2023-CER-001015. Two portable rock crushing screening plants located at 332 Elkington Place, Spring Valley, California. Before we begin our discussion for petition 4536 Cornerstone Aggregates Incorporated, Madam Clerk, have we received any requests from members of the public that wish to address the board on petition 4536?
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have received no requests from members of the public wishing to address the board on petition 4536. However, just give me one moment. However, those members of the public that are joining us via teleconference, please dial into the conference line now using the instructions provided on the screen. You may also indicate that you wish to speak on this item by using the raise hand feature at the bottom of the Zoom screen or by pressing *9 now. Madam Chair, it appears that we do not have any members of the public wishing to provide public testimony today on petition 4536.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Before we get started, I believe, you know, that there are a couple of things that I would like an answer to. Because I think, you know, that would stage, you know, this hearing appropriately. And Emily, I mean, I need to ask for your guidance on this one. It is my understanding that the hearing board does not have jurisdiction on issuing a variance to an entity that lacks, I mean, a permit to operate or an authority to construct. Would that be correct?
Yes, well, it is correct that the hearing board cannot grant a variance that would have the effect of essentially being a variance from a requirement to get a permit.
Thank you so very much. Are we clear, I mean, on that element? Excellent. You know, so thank you so very much on that one. I mean, and so that must be my first question. So before we get started then, I mean, the APCD, I'm looking at, you know, I mean, William, Mr. Jack here. Could you please, I mean, provide us the differences between a certificate of registration for equipment and that of either an authority to construct or a permit for an entity to operate?
So typically certificate of registrations are a quick process for types of operations that don't need significant engineering evaluation. That's my understanding. And which is what the petitioner has for a portable operation in this case. A permit to operate, they're typically involve stationary sources only, and also includes sometimes significant engineering evaluation. That's generally the difference. Registrations are typically for portable and permit to operate for stationary. But there can be some exceptions.
Okay,
But I think that's applicable to this petition.
so in general.
Dan, do you have anything else to add?
Just one small note, that their certificate of registration program is a voluntary program, so a permit to operate can always be obtained, even if the operation is portable.
Mhm. And then the follow-up question, thank you, because that was going to be something that, that was the third question of this thing, so you answer it on in an entity, are both required? Yes or no, for a stationary source?
No,
Not kind of famously, if that's your question.
Exactly, okay, thank you. So if that is the case, so Mr. Weir, welcome, and everybody here, from Cornerstone, I believe, that Mr. Cody Johnson and Mr. Alex Martin, you have been sworn in and represent Cornerstone Aggregates. Try to say that, Bill Marie, 10 times fast. And I wanted to state, that this presentation, because reading, the application, there's going to be some elements here that we need to understand on how it is our jurisdiction as hearing board and the requirements of Cornerstone, to operate what I believe is a stationary source just from the presentation, okay? So you will actually have another chance, to go into that, but right now, what I would like to focus before opening, your presentation is, do you believe, that this variance request, that is within our jurisdiction, within the hearing board jurisdiction, because that, your client does not have a permit to operate as a stationary source. Paul, and before you actually get started with that, tell me, how many times have you been here? Let us know, I'm gonna ask you, so go for that.
Well, I'm sure I didn't prepare for that question. I'm a little embarrassed. It's well over 200 times in the 43 years of consulting, as well as, years being a district associate engineer, which dates back many scores of years there. Addressing your question, and then I have one clarification to make about the nature of the petition too.
Okay.
Yes, we believe that rule 12.1, which is the district's registration rule, makes it very clear that petitioners' efforts here, having a certificate of registration, they have all the rights, including rights to come to the hearing board. And I have that specific site in the rule 12.1, if you'd like that read for the record.
We'll get to it on that a little bit later, but it's
Okay.
potential though that we actually do have jurisdiction on that one.
Right.
So go ahead.
The second point I wanted to make is that at this time, the petitioner would strike any reference to district rule 21, that's the permit conditions rule. That was placed in the petition as a placeholder to make sure that some of the definitions of permit also apply to registrations, and we didn't want to get caught up with a rule 21 permit conditions discussion there. But it's from discussions with the air district and from my rereading of the rules, very comfortable with just making this the citation in rule 12.1, where we have to abide by the conditions found in the registration. So there would be no need to do any discussion on District Rule 21. Again, it was placed there initially as a precautionary measure. The district has made it very clear, and we agree that that would not either be an issue for this hearing or appropriate for this hearing. So thank you for allowing that clarification.
Mhm.
So the petition, which was framed as a Rule 21 and or the Rule 12.1 specific site there, now just becomes that Rule 12.1 specific site as in the petition.
Understood. Thanks for the clarification, Mr. Weir. The other question that I actually have is, is this equipment for which you already, your petitioners already have, our clients actually have the registrations. Is this equipment portable or is this equipment going to be stationary?
At this time, the equipment is portable. There is a and its operation at the site under the existing lease of 6 months, which has already run a considerable amount of that time. That is the only request before the board is to treat this as portable equipment. If, and both Mr. Johnson and Mr. Martin can address this further. If the equipment were to go through a proper shakedown, startup procedures, and be found to actually be adequate for its stated purposes of creating this recycled concrete and asphalt materials, then and only then would a decision be made if that's going to remain portable throughout San Diego County or could be become a piece of stationary equipment by going through the permit process.
Okay, I mean, and as the agent for Cornerstone, what is the period left on these 6 lease, on these 6 month lease?
I'm going to defer for sure to Cody Johnson on that, but I believe there's 3 month, approximately 3 month
With this one
period
first, sir?
left in the lease.
November, the beginning of November is when our lease is up.
November 15.
So 2.5 months. Then if my counting on my fingers is correct, then.
Thank you.
And as a follow-up, and stop me if I'm already doing testimony here.
Oh, you already started. We're recording it, Paul.
Okay. That remaining period, if a variance was granted, would, in my experience working with the mineral products industry over the last 35 years, prove adequate to determine if that equipment, when operated, could perform as expected.
Mhm.
It's not like we're gonna be, we won't. It's clear that we would know if a variance was granted, we were allowed to operate. We would know long before that lease expiration if the equipment will prove adequate for its stated purposes.
Thank you, Paul. Are there any questions, on this topic, from the members of the board?
Not on this topic at this time.
Thank you so very much. Well, we are going to be, we're gonna switch there, so hang on a little minute. As is customary, we're gonna allow, the presentation by, the APCD. So Tay is going to be providing her presentation, or representation of the APCD, and definitely the position statement as well. So please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. My name is Day McGee-Hill. I'm a civil actions investigator with the San Diego County Air Pollution Control District. I will present background information related to petition 4536, district comments on the findings and the district's position. Next slide, please. Thank you. The petition requests the interim portion of an interim and regular variance until December 31st, 2023. From now, previously, it is now struck Rule 21. So it is now section 12.1, sections E4I, and ask for clarification on condition number 1 of 2 portable rock crushing plant certificates of registration. I'll explain these rules in detail later in my presentation, but essentially, petitioner is seeking a variance to use portable equipment as part of a stationary source. Next slide, please. As indicated by this photo, the petitioner Cody Johnson of Cornerstone Aggregates Incorporated and CSJ Equipment Incorporated operates an aggregate crushing, screening, and processing operation at 332 El Kelton Place in Spring Valley, California. In partnership with APM Engineering Incorporated, petitioner desires to operate 2 rock crushing plants at this location. Next slide, please. 332 El Kelton Place was formerly known as the Morrison LE Sand Plant. As seen here, there are residential neighborhoods surrounding, especially to the left and top of this picture. It also has an elementary school with grounds less than 1,000 feet from the plant border. Next slide, please. Like other similar operations throughout the county, the district permitted the equipment at Morrison LE Sand Plant as a stationary source. A Morrison family trust still owns the land and stores the old equipment pictured here on location. This location remains a stationary source to this day as Cornerstone Aggregates. Next slide, please. CSJ Equipment and APM Engineering hold district issues certificates of registration for this pictured newer equipment on site. These certificates allow the equipment to be used in a portable, not stationary manner. As already briefly touched upon, the certificate of registration is a voluntary type of permit, only applicable in cases of portable use. The district determined the use of the equipment at this location is stationary, not portable. Stationary permitting is handling through the district's permit to operate system, not the portable certificate of registration system. Next slide, please. I will now highlight events leading up to today's petition. On May 19th, the district received a dust complaint and inspected the site. The district advised petitioner of the requirements of the district's visible emissions, nuisance, and permitting rules. Specifically, the district mentioned Rule 10, which requires authority to construct at this and other stationary sources. On June 16th, the district received applications for the 2 portable certificates of registration listed in this petition. On June 23rd, the district issued notices of violation for Rule 10, Section A, for installing stationary equipment at this location without authority. Notices of violation clearly stated that a stationary application for a permit to operate must be submitted to operate at this location. Between July 19th and 23rd, the district received 2 more complaints and inspected the site again. On August 9th, as requested, the district issued the portable certificate of registration for the rock crushing plants mentioned earlier. The issuance email explained that the equipment could not be used for any stationary sites, including the 332 El Kelton site. The same day, petitioner submitted the petition being heard today. Additionally, on August 23rd, the district met in person with petitioner and explained that stationary permits to operate would be required to operate at this location, despite the outcome of any variance hearing. The district told petitioner at this meeting that a variance would not prevent the district from alleging Rule 10 violations in the future. The district told petitioner that withdrawing the variance petition was an option, since they are not in violation of certificate of registration conditions or Rule 12.1. To date, petitioner has not submitted the required stationary permit to operate application. Next slide, please. As promised, I will now give a more detailed explanation of the rules relevant to this petition in order to explain the district's comments on the first of the hearing board's required findings. While they may be long and detailed, it's here as a reference if necessary. Since we have already, petitioner indicated that they are not seeking a variance for Rule 21, I'll gloss over Rule 21 for now and skip straight to Rule 12.1, specifically sections E4I. This section requires compliance with all certificate of registration conditions. In the petition, it is unclear if relief is being requested from all certificate of registration conditions when requesting a relief from Rule 12.1, section E4I, or only condition 1. The petitioner should explain what exact conditions it is requesting relief from. The district notes that the public might need to be noticed for any changes to the petition. The district has not alleged and would not cite any violation for any certificate of registration conditions, including condition 1. I'm going to take the time now to explain more in detail what condition 1 is. Condition 1 invalidates the certificate. It is, quote, used as an integral part of the operation of a stationary source or to supplement or expand the stationary source's operation, end quote. This condition is almost identical to Rule 12.1, section B3, which is also part of the slide. This section also invalidates the equipment's certificate of registration when it is used as part of a stationary source. The petitioner has not requested relief from District Rule 12.1, section B3. Similarly, petitioner has not requested relief from District Rule 10, the only rule the district has alleged violations of. District Rule 10 requires an authority to construct and permit to operate at stationary sources. Next slide, please. Finding A requires that the petitioner is or will be in violation of district rules. As just mentioned, the petition contains inconsistencies for finding A. Petitioner has asked for variance relief for rules they are not in violation of. Therefore, finding A cannot be made. In order to prevent future violations of District Rule 10, petitioner needs to submit permit to applications to obtain authorities to construct. The district questions why the petitioner is persisting with this petition. Next slide, please. As already touched upon briefly. Additionally, the district notes that according to California Health and Safety Code, section 42350, the hearing board does not have jurisdiction over District Rule 10. Next slide, please. Finding B requires petitioner to demonstrate that conditions beyond reasonable control prevent compliance. Petitioner has not demonstrated why submitting stationary permit applications and following the same permitting process of every other stationary site is beyond their reasonable control. The district has been waiting for these applications to be submitted for over 2 months. Petitioner has not explained why this operation should be a special circumstance. Finding B has not been proven. Next slide, please. Finding C requires petitioner to show that closing the site would not result in a reduction of air contamination. In other words, the finding asks the petitioner to compare the reduction in air contaminants they were and were not given a variance. Petitioner has not shown what the air contaminants would be if stationary permits to operate were granted, nor has the petitioner asked the district in the form of a stationary permit application to conduct this analysis. The district notes that circumventing the stationary permitting process is not likely to result in a reduction in air contaminants, since emissions impacting those nearby residences and schools would increase from 0. The district further notes that similar plants in the county, which follow the district required stationary permitting process, conduct health risk assessments to analyze air emissions. By attempting to circumvent the stationary permitting process, petitioner might be preventing a required health risk assessment. Thus, finding C has not been proven. Next slide, D, please. Finding D requires petitioner to demonstrate that consideration has been given to curtailing operations and achieving compliance rather than requesting a variance. Petitioner has not given evidence why it did not submit stationary permit applications over 2 months ago, as is required by District Rule 10 to achieve compliance. This has been clearly and repeatedly explained to petitioner. Therefore, binding D cannot be made. The district also notes that the petitioner is not necessarily correct in the petition when stating, once the application is approved by the APCD, petitioner will immediately be in compliance and the variance can expire. Operating the subject equipment at this stationary source will require an authority to construct and a permit to operate, which will not be issued immediately upon approving a permit application. Next slide, please. Finding E requires petitioners to reduce emissions to the maximum extent feasible if the variance is granted. Petitioner has not demonstrated how emissions would be reduced at all, much less to the maximum extent feasible. The district notes that following required stationary permitting procedures might result in quantifiable emission reductions through permit to operate conditions. Thus, finding E cannot be made. Next slide, please. Finding F requires petitioner to show 3 things. The first requirement is to show that if a variance is granted, emissions will not likely create a nuisance. Petitioner has not addressed site-specific circumstances, such as proximity to adjacent homes or a nearby school that might contribute to a nuisance condition. The district also notes we have received 3 complaints about this site. The second requirement is to show why continued operation is not likely to create an immediate threat or hazard to public health or safety. Petitioner needs to provide more detail on the similar recycled plants mentioned in the petition and how those specifics would establish the second part of finding F. The district notes that all similar plants are required to follow the district's stationary permitting requirements to prevent threats to public health and safety, and circumventing these requirements is not a good solution. Find that petitioner would be required to keep records and logs to quantify emissions. The district notes that absent a properly conducted stationary source emission analysis, like those conducted by the district as part of a stationary permitting process, the district cannot determine the accuracy of any emissions petitioner quantifies. Thus, finding F cannot be made. Final slide, please. The district strongly opposes this petition. Petitioner is attempting to circumvent the permitting process by requesting this variance. Petitioner is not in violation and would not be in violation of the requested district rules and conditions. Petitioner is in violation of Rule 10 and would remain in violation of Rule 10 even if this variance were granted. Petitioner has not adequately supported any of the required findings and likely will not do so at the next scheduled regular variance hearing. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you so very much, Note. Are there any questions for APCD staff?
I don't have any at this time. I don't either at this time.
I don't either, but we hold the litigation to get you back into this conversation very soon. Well, I mean, that Mr. Weir, I know that you were writing, your notes, as that was actually providing another position statement, from the district. Now you certainly have the opportunity to make a presentation, that to the board. And, but definitely there are elements of focus, no, that, you should, take into account here. I'm gonna be very honest with you, you need to, at this point in time, you need to prove to me that between May and when, August, those 2 months that, petitioner operated this equipment, I mean, that if 2 months are needed for shakedown, why it is not that it shouldn't, they should not determine already, whether or not, this equipment is relevant, I mean, for the operations that they actually have. They've been operating for longer than 2 months. And second, how is this equipment is not integral and or expands or supplements, I mean, the activities. So please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. And before I start with the regular presentation, I do want to address the first question that you just brought up, okay? It's very important for the board to recognize, and I don't believe the district is ever asserting that that equipment has been out there operating. That would certainly not be the case. The equipment has not been operated. The equipment has been stored on the site while we went through what we believe the proper procedure is for registering portable equipment. And again, just specifically to your question, want to emphasize again, and we can have the direct testimony of both Cody and Alex, as well as I believe the district's record, there's been no operation of that equipment out there. Nor until either a variance is, nor until a variance is granted, would there be any operation of the equipment? Petitioner clearly understands what's required to register portable equipment, sought that registration, waited patiently for that registration, which the district was able to grant. It was delayed on the district's part because of staff shortages and people being out on leave. So unless there's another question from the board about, are we operating, did we operate? The answer is clearly no. They waited. And they waited until the registration for both pieces of equipment were issued.
That's nice. And also thank you.
Found a condition in the registrations that under the district's interpretation of this piece of land being a stationary source, a conclusion that the petitioner does not believe is accurate.
Okay. So these equipment, that we're actually talking about today, I mean, it's not integral part, neither supplements or expands, the use of already permitted equipment. Is that correct?
Since there is no existing permitted equipment at the site, nor has there been for at least 9 years, and that was documented by a search of the district's records, and I believe in my statement of support that documentation is included there, then yes, it's not going to operate at this time as a stationary source, and it's certainly not implementing any other or supplementing any other operation at the site. The site has no existing permits from the air district, nor have there been any for, I believe it's almost 9 years. We did not look past the 9 years, but as part of the petitioner's due diligence to make sure that we were properly going to be able to operate this portable equipment as portable equipment under Rule 12.1. Then they had requested that I do that research, and the research comes back there's no permits there. If, for example, there had been even an inactive permit for the site. We would have needed to address that,
Mhm.
but finding that there's no permits there. And that for the limited operation that we would anticipate under rule 12.1. It's a piece of land where that's where you go to find out if your equipment is going to work.
Okay, I mean, there are some gaps, I mean, that in my mind right now. Okay,
Yes, ma'am.
so first of all, I don't think, that my question was answered, satisfactorily. You provided part of the answer, but not quite maybe the way I wanted to hear it. So let's go back to the question. I mean, is it, your position that this registered equipment is not an integral part, nor will it supplement or expand, again, any equipment in this place that presumably is under still Morris's permit? I mean, which that would be a stationary source? Or maybe I'm confused on that presentation.
Well, again, clearly the answer to your question is, yes, I am confident that none of this equipment will be operated as a stationary source or supplementing any permits, because there are no permits out there, and there have not been any permits for a period of 9 years.
So then, I'm sorry to say, let me go back. So where are these complaints coming from?
I don't believe the district has shared any of the complaints.
Well, they said that there are complaints. I would imagine that the district, would make, some association with complaints specific to the site. So if there are leased, I mean, is this properly leased by only one party? Is this a co-location lease? I mean, how does that actually work? Are there many operators here?
Although, again, I will have Cody address that. There are no other operations there.
No,
Okay,
just Cornerstone aggregates.
okay. I mean, that's so, so
It
Mr.
is-
Johnson, what is it that you're doing in this place that you actually have leased, for pretty much 4 months, now? What are you doing with that property right now?
We're a material yard, so we supply topsoil, sand, gravel.
Okay.
We bring in recycled concrete and just like a material yard. Support the community around us and contractors for the county.
Okay, I mean, that's so, are there covers, for the sand or anything, that would actually happen, some silicate material or anything like that? How are the controls in your area? And how many hours do you operate per day?
Our hours are from 7 to 5.
Okay,
So
Our control is mostly water, so we have water truck on site at all hours and we keep all of our piles wet. And we don't have any sand piles on site right now, but when we do, we would cover them if they're inactive, but if they're if they're active, it wouldn't be covered.
so as the owner, well, as I guess, lessee of this, the site, when APCD received, these complaints, did the APCD communicate with you at all?
They communicated with us if they received the complaints, but the complaints were never verified. I don't think there's any complaint that they came out, inspected and said that we needed to make any changes. They made us aware of what we need to be cognizant of, but that was all. Like the dust complaint that came out, they came out and inspected, but they didn't see any visible dust when they were on site.
So let's say, that you get these variants, okay, that's so, your agent indicated that you could do that shakedown testing, I guess, that within that 2-month period, because it's through November 15th, even though the request actually goes through December 31st, I don't think, we can go beyond that. Okay, that because it's all tied to the lease. What are you gonna do with that equipment?
What do you mean
If
after?
you definitely, after the November 15th, do you move it somewhere else? You have other properties, don't you?
We may renew the lease depending on how this operation goes, so. The full background on this property is we're planning on doing a concrete recycling plant there. We did our due diligence and we did a permit search. We had Paul conduct the permit search. They the district's own feedback regarding the absence of permits, we have documented in email. So that went back to 2014. We're unaware of any permits prior on this property before the 8/23 in-person district meeting that we had in preparation for this meeting. That was the first time they ever mentioned any permits at that site prior. So we were issued the notice of violation on 6/23 for Rule 10A. I responded on 6/23 via email saying that we thought we were portable, and that's why we didn't apply for the stationary permit, and we didn't understand why we got a violation for Rule 10A. Again, I sent a formal letter via email on 6/27 to just make sure that we had a response within the time frame. Again, that just restated the same thing, saying that we feel that we should be portable at this site. We don't understand why we're issued this violation. I received a formal response from Nicholas McCormick. In that response, it restated that we need to be stationary, but it didn't mention anything about why. And that was what I was trying to figure out the entire time. And every time that we talked to the compliance officer or the inspector, whatever they go by, they made it sound like the reason that we were stationary is because they thought that we were going to be there more than 12 months. It never was looking back in the past saying this was a stationary source in the past, and you were either operating at a stationary source or expanding a stationary source. So that was complete news to all of us on August 23rd, just 2 weeks ago. That's when we found out that, okay, the district actually has a valid point on why we're stationary, but up until that point, we had no idea.
And let me add to that. So, and if we were gonna be stationary, right, we started Cornerstone, we would apply for a stationary permit in the very beginning. Stationary permits take a long time to get. And so we still believe that we're portable, and that's why we're not taking action on a stationary permit.
Okay, I mean, that's, again, you're, kind of, interesting way of slicing. You're very smart, that. I mean, 12.1 and 10, I'm also looking at, to your interest, from the operational standpoint, because if something would be granted, again, this is something that theoretical right now, you will actually have, some time of, downtime until that, stationary permit would be actually fulfilled. Okay, so that's all those are all my questions on that one. I mean, that's a polio. I mean, you may continue. APCD actually indicated that there are no violations to 12.1. So therefore, I mean, that to grant a variance request, it has to be to 12.1, because you are in violation or will be in violation. So what is the will be in violation?
Thank you, and that was one of the points that I wish to make. The district actually didn't point out that petitions are properly received if a petitioner is or will be in violation. And if we were to start up operations, which haven't occurred yet, and the district still asserts that this is a stationary source, then we would be in violation of our condition number 1 of the registration until we can get that properly adjudicated and show that's not a stationary source. So this was our way of not trying to walk a fine line or anything, but just say, okay, what is it the district is still going to assert with our Rule 12.1 registration? And it's likely, as I think the testimony's been, they're not going to abandon that approach that this is a stationary source. We believe that's not the case. And it would not be the case until if and when we start stationary operations there.
So what, going back and forth on the integral part of the supplemental expanding of the existing equipment, so that's an interesting one. Okay.
That's
so
the
please
only
continue.
purpose for that, is that if we were to try and operate under Rule 12.1, I believe the district would, now that we have our certificates, I believe the district would actually invoke condition number 1, say, this is invalid at this stationary source. But again, that's one of the things that the hearing board has jurisdiction over. And for the record, it's a short paragraph, but I do want to
Sure,
read that
read it.
in there now. So registration means the process of obtaining a certificate of registration for an emission unit. In this case, it would be 2 units because they are separate. Registration is the same as permit as used in Division 26 of the California Health and Safety Code, Part 3, Chapter 8, Part 4, Chapter 4, Articles 2 and 4, respectively entitled Hearing Board Variances and Orders of Abatement. The Air Pollution Control Officer and the Hearing Board shall have the same authority concerning registrations as with permits, and the owner or operator of registered equipment shall be entitled to the same privileges and rights granted to a permittee. And that's specifically subsection 15, C15 of the registration rule. So although we firmly believe that the hearing board has jurisdiction over this because we have a valid registration, then I think that's the key part there that should, I believe, assure the board that you have the proper authority to hear this, but still have to make a decision based on the facts to support the findings that are required. And so having addressed that issue, hopefully successfully, I'm gonna go through the findings and occasionally we might tangle with some of the characterizations of the air district in their presentation. Again, but hopefully we've got the will be in violation now issued, which again, the district had failed to.
You had me reading case law last night, I actually have to say, that's so for a good time here. Again, it is opinion on how we actually read it, so far it's for me, again, I'm just only a member of the board. It's a very fine line, that we're actually walking. Personally, from what I read, last night, and the brushing up, and definitely Emily will be asking you very soon. It is, it's a matter of 12.1. You need to prove to us when you say that you're going to be in violation, because currently you're not. And second, also when could actually be, into 10A, that for which we actually have no jurisdiction. If there's something would be granted, I think you would actually have about a day of variance with protection. That's about it. I'm sorry to say,
No,
but that's,
and
you look it up, you start doing, it's part of the line, that you're actually operating, that's it, so you become, that. So, but again, that's only, mine.
So
So if you can go through the findings per se, I would also like to know your financial impact.
yes, and the equipment being discussed as part of the variance had been recently purchased for over $400,000. So that represents a considerable investment of the petitioner and the owners of the equipment who are, and there are more costs that will be associated with readying that equipment for operation. And both Cody and Alex, who are the operational arms, can more specifically address both the time and the additional costs that would be required to bring that equipment into operation.
Our generator alone's over $1 million, so. And then to get our equipment up and ready, which we're trying to do, we need to do a lot of maintenance on it, make sure it's good and able to do what we're trying to do. It needs a lot of work, and not only that, are we talking about the financial hardship of?
We'll be getting there in just a minute. I wanted to clarify for the board that we're looking at more than a $400,000 investment, which is right now being idled. Because although we want to operate it under portable,
But it's portable, you can take it anywhere you want to, pretty much.
and where they want it to be, because
I understand.
there's a ready supply of materials that could be crushed. It is not, again, it's not at a stationary source.
I get it. No,
And if I
sir.
can comment, right now it's in an inoperable state. There's pieces missing. We need a control panel for our cone crusher, which we haven't even ordered yet because of this financial hardship. It's a pretty substantial investment. So until we know the direction of all this, we want to kind of conserve our resources and everything. So our violation of Rule 10A, we don't agree with, even if we were a stationary source, because it is inoperable. We are literally just storing it there.
Mhm.
But yeah, like we can't just bring it to somebody's site because nobody's gonna allow us to bring it to their portable site until it's
Perfect.
operational, and that's
Okay.
what its purpose was there. We thought that we could operate under portable and at least do a test run and make sure everything was good.
Okay. No, that, yeah, reasonable, thank you.
Again, in the petition itself or under facts and support findings, in summary, then as we said, more importantly, petitioner would not be able to conduct a short-term evaluation of the suitability of the equipment and its ability to operate to produce desired aggregate products. So there's a considerable economic hardship there. In addition, there's a second component in that there are people that could be working on that will need to work on that equipment that are currently either unemployed or underemployed because we need to be able to operate the equipment to put it into the best possible configuration. There is, and I believe initially we had estimated that that was gonna be 5 people that would be, employed there. In earlier discussions this week, I think a more accurate number Cody could provide, and maybe we could even list the amount of people and their jobs that would be employed there.
Maybe we'll take 5.
You'd like to,
Yeah.
okay, so we have someone that, we got 2 laborers that run the crusher, that pick out the trash, the rebar and stuff. We got 2 plant loader operators. We have a control tower operator, and then we have our scale house and office person in there, plus our water truck driver. So there's a lot of people that are at stake right now. If we don't get this thing up and going, so
No, thanks.
plus me and Alex's investment.
Mhm. No, I appreciate it.
So, unless there are other questions at this time with respect to finding B, the substantial economic harm that's occurring. And if there were later, we'd be happy to address those further, but those are easily documented economic harm that's occurring to the petitioner. Finding C, which is the closing or taking would be without a corresponding benefit in reducing air contaminants. Portable equipment registered under Rule 12.1 is allowed by right then a total of 82 pounds a day of particulate emissions. And it's always important to make sure that the plant emissions, the facility emissions are added together. So we have 2 pieces of equipment. And collectively, those two pieces of equipment, if they were operating, would be significantly below the allowable levels. So by right, if you have a piece of portable equipment or combination of two crushing, then you have these emissions. May you have them there forever? No, that's not how portable equipment works, you know. You can't have them as a stationary source without going through the evaluation that the district is. And if we're going to be able to operate that as a stationary source in the future, certainly that would be the requirements to seek and obtain. It's just not enough to file, okay? Now, one other thing that might address why petitioner's been a little hesitant in going through the full permitting process. Besides the rather modest consulting fees that would be involved in preparing those applications, the Air District is actually going to spend over $15,000. And that's based on other equipment there. So that's an additional burden that petitioner would have to go through.
But that's a
If
burden.
they don't end up operating it, then that's another $15,000 that they would have spent.
Well, I need to bring you back, I mean, because I'm actually talking about 12.1, I mean, that's where I actually need to rule, I mean, that would, you, a representative of your clients are saying, you know, that you will be in violation, so this is something that I am not gonna take into account right now, because we're talking about portable unit, you know, so there you go, according to the operations is portable, so, you know, please
That would
continue.
be how we would operate under Rule 12.1.
Okay, you know, so I mean, so go to C, please, I mean, that's, so again, focusing on 12.1.
There's a large amount of concrete, broken slabs of concrete pavement and asphalt that need to be processed in this county. You don't take them to landfills anymore because that's an inappropriate use, and there's state laws and county ordinances that want to see this material recycled. There is no close-in area in the Spring Valley where materials can be dropped off and processed. In fact, this site, just even using it as portable equipment there, that's an ideal place for this to occur. If the materials have to be moved somewhere else, that's more truck traffic, that's more truck emissions, but it's mostly just truck traffic going further there. So that is what we're presenting for the for findings under C. With longer distances for truck trips for both the imported material and the export of recycled products, and longer truck trips, that's more time on the road. So this is a location that is ideally suited for this type of operation. And again, during the period of the variance, we're seeking just to make sure that this equipment can be actually operated to perform these functions. With respect to finding D, that we've given consideration to curtailing operations and source in lieu of obtaining variance. Well, we don't believe that it's stationary source. The fact that there was a permit that's now long expired, that just doesn't make sense to us. And this is again an ideal location to have properly registered equipment that would comply with all the other registration conditions. And that'll let me loop back to one thing the district said. We want to be clear that all we're seeking relief from is condition one. The conditions about opacity, conditions about not having emissions off the property line. Those conditions would remain in force if a variance is granted. And those conditions in Rule 12.1 registrations have always proven adequate to protect the surrounding area, the public, and to provide compliance with the district's rules. So
So the efforts, to achieve compliance instead of requesting a variance have been, again, that this is a portable unit. When it operates, because it's not operating, it will comply, with all the elements of the registration. Except, for what you're seeking for, there would be condition number one.
Right.
Okay, next.
for the period of the variance for the period that the variance would be in effect. Petitioner would reduce excess emissions to the maximum extent possible. We know what the registrations allow for production in this period of time. And petitioner can certainly state and agree to any conditions that the hearing board might want to impose that shows how we're reducing as much as practical. However, we do need to operate that equipment. And so the tonnages that would be associated with that, we're still going to need to be able to process 30,000 to 50,000 tons in this portable mode.
In what period of time?
Through the end of the variance, which we were currently
requested
requesting
through
for
31st of this.
December 31st.
Okay, 30 to 50,000 tons, of material, that through block 31.
And again, that range is 30 to 50,000 tons.
Mhm.
Okay, I'm sorry.
No, I just.
I didn't want to
wrote
leave
it
you with
correctly.
just.
3 to 50K ton, that's so.
That's, and Madam Chair, excuse me,
No
I
problem.
missed the K part
That's no problem.
of that, and so that is something that the petitioner could certainly agree to. Want to go back to a note here. There was another item that. Want to point out that. Because of the limited nature and extent of operations associated with Rule 12.1, the portable equipment, then there is no requirement built into that regulation that requires any health risk assessment to be done. And there is, however, a part of the registration rule that requires us to have the equipment greater than 1,000 feet from the outer boundary of a school. So that includes playgrounds and items like that. And I want to assure the board that we have met that requirement. That was one of the items in our statement of support. The district had raised that. They were, I believe, assuming that the property boundaries, which is not what's in the regulation, that the equipment has to stay more than 1,000 feet away from that outer boundary. And from our presentation, and I do have a better map. Mine was a line in that statement, and it's there. Oh, and it turns sideways on me too. Hopefully somebody's better at that than. That was difficult. To read. First, we have, map that shows where the northmost piece of equipment is, where that would operate. And clearly shows that 1,000-foot radius would not include any part of even the outer bound of the elementary school.
Just for reference, I mean, I'm sorry, I'm standing up here. I mean, so that is, so this is the only area that is released. Not
Yes.
this area.
That is true.
So from the boundary here to the outer boundary of the school, so that is more, more than 1,000 feet, is that your?
It is indeed.
So
Can I-
maybe that gap is about, more than 1,000?
Go ahead.
Okay, did you ask if that was the only portion that is leased?
Yeah, I
Okay,
did.
no, the entire property is leased, but that would be the only area where the crusher would be operating. Within the blue boundary.
okay, Thank you. Thanks for the clarification.
Absolutely.
And the one map that I've just given to the clerk would more clearly illustrate that because it has 1,000-foot ring there that shows that operations of the equipment would not be within that 1,000 feet. So that part of the discussion came up when we met with the district ahead of time. And we felt that we needed to clarify that because otherwise that is a condition of registrations. That's how our public schools are protected. And
Okay,
to make sure that it's more than 1,000 feet away. I believe that's going to take us down then to
F maybe?
F, which is the record keeping requirements, but also a need to discuss why emissions would not create a nuisance, okay? So we haven't operated yet at the site. So there's no absolute guarantee that a nuisance wouldn't potentially occur. However, all of the conditions of the registrations are found in Rule 12.1. All the ones that we're going to abide by then are meant to make sure exactly of that fact. Those are not just the minimum requirements, but those are there to make sure that no nuisance is created. And I think it would be odd for the district to necessarily presume that a public nuisance is going to be created when other recycle plant operations operate in this county, don't create a public nuisance, whether they're registered or whether they're permitted. And similar crushing plants consisting of both jaw crushers and cone crushers are operated under Rule 12.1 in this county. And specifically, I have direct knowledge of the following four.
I do not want to listen about the report because we don't have a representative here. That we would actually say, certainly that there could be a possibility of, that
Good.
actually happening.
I would
do
like
Like,
to
when we
Point,
speak of other people, when they actually have no data, to verify that, so
Okay.
go ahead, please.
and those, as well as other registrations, are contained in the district's database. Especially under fee schedule 07X, which is the fee schedule that covers portable rock crushing equipment. So there's, in the district's files, there's plenty of documentation that registered portable crushing equipment consisting of jaws and cones, conveyors and radial stackers that operate in this county without creating a public nuisance. And those operations would certainly be greater than the 30 to 50,000 ton range that petitioner is willing to accept as production limits if the variance is granted.
Okay.
Some of those plants are rated well over 500,000 tons a year of production.
Because they actually have a permit to operate.
No,
Okay.
oh, no, let me clarify again, and thank you, Madam Chair. No, these are registered. These are Rule 12.1 registrations that I'm talking about, not permits.
Okay,
These-
no, so.
And,
yeah,
and
appreciate
again,
that.
that's the difference here. Those are in the district's database under under fee schedule 07X.
Mhm.
And I've got those numbers. Those are public documents. I didn't bring the actual registrations with me, but again, those are the registrations for portable rock crushing equipment,
I mean,
not stationary equipment.
Thank you, Paul. Any questions, to Paul, and the representatives from Cornerstone Aggregates from the board members?
I, just maybe for the sake of brevity more than anything, I'm gonna limit my questions to what I think is probably the most relevant, which is, what will you do if the variance is denied?
Woody and Alex.
Yeah, thought about that. We really haven't. Honestly, we did our due diligence. We went into this, doing our research, thinking that we're gonna be operating under portable. And we wouldn't have had an issue any of the times changing our approach in going stationary. We would have been given, I think, valid documentation or been told that there had been previous registrations there. Permits. So when we were originally leasing the property, we went into it knowing that might be a possibility, and that's why we did the search. If the search would have came back showing permits there, we would have immediately gone that route. We probably would have negotiated with the owner of the property and said, hey, can we start this lease once we actually obtain these permits, rather than starting the lease right away, because we expected to obtain the portable registration and then be able to start crushing and making revenue. So this entire time we've been kind of just putting out costs. So if it doesn't get granted, I don't know what direction we would go, because I feel like the district had plenty of opportunities to tell us that there had been previous permits at the site. Both when we checked for the records and they said there had been nothing since 2014 in the presentation. They said the most recent permit expired in 2014, so that should have came up. When we were issued the notice of violation, it didn't mention anything about it. In my 2 responses to that notice of violation, I was saying that there hadn't been any permits there in the past, and the response that we received was saying there's always the forward direction. Well, we think that you're going to be there for more than 12 months, and that's why we're not looking at it as a portable source. So we've just never really considered it this far down the line. So we would,
But in summary, petitioner would continue to lose its ability to operate the equipment. That's causing significant financial loss. There are no plans to go anywhere else because no other sites exist that would take equipment that's not fully functional. And indeed, whether or not there's a site that it could be moved to that the district would not think is already a stationary source as well. So it's the financial impacts of not being able to operate this equipment at this time. That those are the impacts that are going to continue.
So in your petition and in your testimony today, you mentioned additional truck trips. So what additional truck trips are you referring to then?
Oh, if materials can't be delivered to the site and eventually processed under this at the site, just even with the portable, then those trucks are gonna have to go somewhere. It's gonna be a longer haul.
So these aren't your trucks you're talking about. This is just additional material that might be brought to the site would have to go somewhere else, and you're opining that it would be further away.
Exactly. And it's coming to this site because that's the closest site. Trucking is so expensive that when you have a site, that's where people hardly even have to advertise.
Sure.
And they're also my trucks too. I do own my own trucks.
Okay. So how much material is currently at the site that would be processed by this equipment?
Probably 25,000 tons.
And so I guess I'm gonna, ask again, you've got 25,000 tons of material there. If the variance is denied, I'm assuming that you wouldn't be operating the portable equipment. So then what, like, you really haven't thought any further?
No, I mean, if we would have known this in the beginning, we would have probably already applied for a stationary, because we would have already got it by now. We've wasted time doing nothing, just waiting here. And all night, then we would have already had our stationary permit by now, once we would have applied in the very beginning for it.
The district is currently taking 4 to 6 months to process that type of permit, so would you have been along the route? Yes. Would you be finished? That's given the current district staffing situations, it'd be hard to imagine how it would have been finished at this time. But more importantly, we need to get that equipment up and running. And this is the only mechanism that we can see for getting that equipment up and running.
But let's define up and running. You can definitely do the PLCs, I mean, like you actually need to install things of that nature. You can do the electronic and I mean, the monitoring things of that nature. I mean, and then, the up and running would be when you actually get to start crushing. Is that what you're actually talking about, up and running?
Yes,
Exactly.
actually operating the.
Exactly. I mean, as intended.
Yes.
So doing what is intended, okay. So good, because I mean, certainly there was this one, if I'm not mistaken, sir. You still need to tweaking, there's some equipment and things of that nature. So there's some modules, need to be up and, that you need to get that done already beforehand.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to make sure. Any other questions?
I just have a quick question.
Please do.
So, where are the complaints coming from? I read an email, yesterday from a parent, concerned about, the dust, going into her house from your yard. Where is that? Where the dust is coming from? Is it?
Well, the winds don't even blow towards the houses, and we keep the dust down to nothing. Every time air district came out, there wasn't even a violation for dust. So-
No, I'm sorry. So, what operation are you guys doing? That's creating that dust that the neighbors are talking about. Is it this?
It would be the material yard and
Our trucks come in and dump material.
Oh, okay, so that's what maybe they're talking about, that might flow over to their houses. Okay. That was just my question.
No, thank you. For everybody's benefit, I mean, that is part of the packet as well, you know, we received. Excuse me, I mean, you know, a public comment, I mean, in today's hearing. And that which is being shown right now on the screen, I mean, for benefit, for everybody's benefit. And, I mean, that resident actually lives in a Sweetwater Hills townhouse, located just yards away from the aggregate facility. And that she is concerned about the air pollution for herself and her 2 young children, I mean, whose bedroom window face this aggregate facility, as well as on behalf of the elderly neighbors. I mean, so that is what, I mean, Mr. Gonzalez.
Right, that's what I was referring to, yeah.
about. Okay, so thank you, Mr. Gonzalez. So it says none of my neighbors nor myself are notified that this business will be opening so close to our homes. Nor were we notified about this permit for additional machines. I found out by Googling the facility in order to complain about the noise rather, and look up the permits. You know, so that's, I mean, I just wanted to make sure that in case you haven't read it or, you know, so that's what, you know, I mean, it's part of this complaint, okay, you know, so. There are many ways, I mean, to reach the APCD, for example, via phone, email, I mean, so. This public member, I mean, that chose not to do it by email. Now we appreciate that, and we encourage that as well.
Okay, and as a final comment there, the existing conditions in the registrations then would prevent would not allow any visible emissions to cross the property line. And that's something that's complied with, again, routinely with registered portable crushing equipment throughout the county.
So Paul, you're an engineer, I'm a scientist. There's so many more particulars that are not seen. So.
I have a question for the district, actually, the more we talk, the more I get confused about
I
this.
know, yes.
There is an NOV issued to this facility, one or more than one? One NOV. What was that NOV issued for? What were they violating?
Rule 10A
For operating equipment without a permit,
for constructing.
equipment without a permit.
We're not alleging operation.
Okay, thank you. Just
Mhm.
want to make sure I understood the nature of that
Yeah.
NOV. And the complaints that you said you received 3 complaints.
Yeah, for dust and operation without permits.
Okay,
Generally speaking, that's what the complaints.
and you investigated those complaints.
Yes.
Was there any conclusion made about whether those complaints were the source of those complaints were coming from the Cornerstone facility?
No, we didn't verify any violations of
Okay,
anything directly related to the complaints.
okay,
So we saw potential for dust, but we
Okay.
didn't actively see anything that would exceed visible emission limits. And we didn't verify actual operation of the equipment, so the complaint might have been referring to, I'm speculating, maybe trucks driving around or something like that.
okay. And it sounds like there's other non-permitted, other activities at the site that are allowed to occur without a permit.
Yeah, like trucks.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Just one small
Wait,
point.
after you come and
Very short.
close so that we can actually deliver it here. Because I mean, I am with Steve, every single time I slice this one, it is a nice exercise in project management, by the way. I can see how this is, you know, I mean, at least in my head, but yeah, I know our deliberation needs to be something different. Go ahead, Paul.
Okay. It would be our sworn testimony of all 3 of us here representing the operation, that there has been no operation of that
appreciate
equipment.
that.
That's, yeah,
No, I appreciate that. You know, I mean, that's how we operate here. Just, you know, let's be honest. I mean, and that's it, you know, so if you operate it, you say, oops, one of those, and let's continue. Okay, so
I'm
that's.
not trying to disparage any person who calls,
No,
but
I mean, but
there's
no
been no
source.
operation.
You know,
and
the
the
good
district
source of
not
that
letting
is,
that
you
either.
know, it's public. So that's okay, you know, I appreciate that.
If there's a chance for more district comments, we could respond.
Sure,
of that.
please, you know, so, yeah, I mean, that's,
And just as a summary response, we are not and will not allege any violations of the rules which petitioner is requesting a variance from. So we're not alleging any violations of certificate conditions or Rule 12.1. Petitioner is here disputing our determination that it's a stationary source, which is not a hearing board matter. There's a lot more I could say, but it really comes down to that. This is about arguing a violation, not a variance.
No, I mean, I definitely appreciate that. And to be honest with you, it's just, I mean, it's very fine line that we're actually going on between the two. I got to exercise every so often. I mean, to do that, I tell you, I was until very late last night, reading case law, not just rules, case law. It's like, okay, then.
I do have one more question before we close the.
Go ahead. Until I find my things.
So you're asking, I just want to clarify what you're asking for a variance from, but my understanding is that in the petition, you're asking for relief from Rule 12.1E4I.
Yes. It's
Which-
actually lowercase Roman numeral I, but yeah, I works.
Okay, lowercase I, which is, excuse me, I'm gonna just read it out loud just one more time. An owner or operator whose emission unit has been issued a certificate shall comply with all conditions listed in the certificate.
Yes,
That's what you're asking for a variance from. And specifically, condition 1 of each of the 2 permits,
thank you. That, yeah, and only that one condition.
which, let me read that out loud just to make sure that we're clear and that we're deliberating on the right thing. Get back to it. Here we go, certificate of registration. And there's similar wording, so I don't really want to read both out loud, but equipment units should be configured and operated so as to meet the definition of a portable emission unit as defined in Rule 12.1. Equipment unit's certificate of registration shall be invalid when such equipment is used as an integral part of the operation of a stationary source or to supplement or expand the stationary source's operation.
Yes, that is.
That's what you're asking for variance. Okay.
Yeah.
Then I don't have any more questions for petitioner or district at this time.
Thank you so very much. Well, it's
Can I add one more thing?
Can I close it? Okay, we're gonna be asking you anyways, no, but just one last one, please.
This will be the last thing, unless you ask me. any
No,
questions.
just go ahead then.
Even if the board grants this variance, they'll still be in violation of Rule 10 if they operate the equipment. We would go write another violation, in other words.
Understood.
Thank you. Can I, please? Zoop.
Permission granted.
Thank you so very much. I mean, I think, that this is one of those elements not that is definitely not clear cut. But today before the board is a request for an interim variance. Which is, that there's good cost stated in the order, good cost, okay. With the provision that when you return for the regular variance, we, at this point in time, we are pretty sure that you can meet those 6 conditions. Okay, it's not just good cost or whatever, for the 30 days, 90 days, no, I think 90 days is what you're requesting. It is that, we need to actually make that bridge, okay? That's so, Steve, let's actually say, where do you stand on this one?
Well, I'm looking at these conditions and it, what the petitioner is asking for is to get rid of a condition that says that they can't use the equipment at a stationary source. It doesn't give them permission to operate at this source if it's stationary. And the issuing of this variance doesn't change that. So I'm really not, I don't see, based on the testimony today, I don't see anything that in 30 days that I would issue a variance for. So I don't think good cause exists.
Thank you, Steve. I mean, Mr. Gonzalez, I mean, Jose, what are your thoughts?
Well, as far as the district was mentioning, it won't matter if the variance is issued or not, they're still gonna, apply rule number 10 to them, so. Is that what my understanding was?
Correct.
Yeah, so that's kind of my view on it.
You've known my position, but let me actually repeat it. We cannot grant you a variance not to violate, the fundamental element of the registration. I don't think, I just like, Mr. Engelmann and Mr. Gonzalez, that granting your variance today, that would actually make difference, that in this matter. It does make difference to operations. I understand that, we do, that's so, and that's not where also not grappling with. I think, there's consensus here, that we cannot grant you, the request for an interim variance. Okay. We haven't voted yet. Let me actually just do it that a little bit later. Negotiate here. I know that we can definitely not speak, for the load, of the engineering department, within the APCD, but Mr. Shock actually is the chief of compliance. Okay, so, is there any way that we could assist, that these individuals, I'm not saying, in expedite fashion, but maybe, there's some sort of, that they can just bridge this gap. We want for them to be successful, but we want for them to be successful. About on and compliant, both things. I believe now that you gentlemen actually, that's what you're actually seeking for. You're not getting away from this, it's just not let it become convoluted in the rules. It is my feeling that you really, and you, based on your testimony, that you really, want to be compliant. So what kind of hand holding can we actually do with these petitioners?
We can absolutely request to see, again, as well as the petitioner can, to expedite and see if there is a way to move this along. But again, I think we're also putting the cart before the horse.
I know.
Without an application and understanding and a full evaluation. It's not clear at this point how long that the engineering evaluation will take. So I think, we first need to see an application, which we requested many times now for, beginning months ago. So is feasible if the application was received at that time, we would be there or nearly there.
Okay,
So, we need to see an application to really be able to say how far along, but we definitely can, try to see if this can be moved forward.
and an application means a complete application. It's not just a formulary and stuff like that and say, okay, they stamped it, it has to be, a complete application. That's what Paul is gonna guide you through, okay? The sooner that you get to start, in this process, that the better it will be. So would like to see, what's going on, within a month from today or something like that, so maybe 2 months from today, just, put it on the agenda to see, where the status is, out of curiosity. Okay, but certainly, please reach out, continue these conversations with the APCD. There's a small business unit with the APCD that you can work with, as well, we're gonna be, working with Paul on this one, I also expect. So this line of communication is always open to anybody, okay? Certainly you have, Paul as your agent, but then, if you actually have a question, that please just pick up the phone, they will be really very helpful. And begin, so we can definitely, they will help you with that, okay? Just don't be afraid and shy. That's it. Any other comments?
The only comment I'd make is, putting a check in on a potential hearing date on a requested petition where I think the petitioner has not been able to make the findings. So a check-in, we could share the information, but
We just share.
yeah, we'd share the information, but just didn't know if that was
It's just a
anything
check-in,
related to, okay.
just a check-in,
Okay.
that's it, just a check-in, so. Yeah. The.
And Madam Chair,
You're gonna, Oh, hi, Emily. I mean, that we did not see you unfortunately, so we did
Don't
not see
see
that.
me, I'm sorry. I was trying so hard. I just wanted to note that unless the petition for a regular variance is withdrawn, it would still stand. So that's just something to keep in mind as far as scheduling goes.
No, thank you so very much. I mean, that's so, I will definitely, what is your suggestion to allow petitioner to make a consideration for withdrawal? Later, I mean, that's up to the petitioner, isn't it?
That would be entirely up to the petitioner whether or not they want to come back and have another hearing on the regular variance.
Thank you so very much. I mean, but at this point in time, I'm thinking of that. We just need to make the formal motion for the interim. Thank you, Emily. Oh, she left us again. Okay,
She's still there, just not showing on.
Still here.
there you go. Thank you, Emily. Thank you for that. I mean, that very quickly, so because I we need to have some motion.
And to that, the petitioner will be filing a application to change the hearing date for the regular variance.
That's okay.
And just so you know,
Mhm.
that we will not be withdrawing the petition, but we'll be changing that date. Clearly, the opportunity to do further work with the district appears to be there. And so we will be taking advantage of that. So, and I believe that continuance has to only be on file 3 days before the actual hearing, but for the courtesy that the board has extended today, that request to continue past the September hearing for the regular variance will be actually filed with the clerk of board tomorrow, so that you don't have to go through this 2 weeks from now. It won't be kicked down the road very far because, there are these economic
Yes.
severe economic penalties that are being forced on the petitioner through outside his reasonable control.
We definitely understand. I mean, well, I mean, this is definitely something that you need to negotiate. I mean, with your clients, certainly. I mean, and working with the clerk of the board, I mean, the hearing board. And then we will, definitely will get notice, no problem with that one.
Absolutely. Any other questions from the board? We do not have anything else to say.
Hopefully, we will need to see, each other again, because the permit will be just right there. But right now we need to make a motion, so, the motion is to deny, the request for variance for petition number 4536, not for lack of good cause. Do I get a second?
Second.
Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Madam Chair, can you confirm who seconded?
I second.
Member Engelmann. Member Gonzalez,
Aye.
Member Engelmann,
Aye.
Member Spencer, Vice Chair Schlick, Chair Rodriguez.
Aye.
Madam Chair, that motion passes with all members present voting aye, with the exceptions of Member Spencer and Vice Chair Schlick, who are not present for today's meeting.
Thank you so very much, Madam Clerk. So.
Madam Chair, if I may just
Please
give
go
some
ahead.
updates for filing, because the regular variance does require a 30-day notice. For the October 12th meeting, we would have needed, yes, it would have been yesterday, so the latest we could, if a request for continuance were to be received, we would have to have it received by September 20th.
Oh, thank you, and for clarity, the hearing for the regular variance is already scheduled.
For the 21st, correct?
Right, so there'll be,
So either you would have to come before the board and request it verbally, or I would have to have it ahead of time so that I can complete the noticing for October 26th.
And again, it is the intention of the petitioner to file that request for continuance with the clerk of the board tomorrow.
That would be amazing. That would be amazing. Thank you. I just wanted to.
Oh,
make
yeah,
that
and again,
clarification for
thank
the
you.
record.
You've been
Appreciate that.
very helpful with that.
And one last report, there are vacancies for the hearing board that I would like to announce for the record, and it would be 2 public member vacancies. And if you have if any members of the public or any one in this room know anyone that is interested in applying for the hearing board, the application information is available on the hearing board's website.
No, thank you so very much, no, Madam Clerk. No, that's really very important. I mean, that's so. The invitation is also open for you, you know, just wanted to let you know that was part of that invitation. Well, I mean, I believe, you know, that this actually concludes, I mean, the business of the hearing board, I mean, for today. Thank you, everyone, for the next regular meeting of the APCD hearing board will take place on September 21st, 2023. I mean, in this location at 9 a.m. So have a great week.
Thanks.
We disconnect yet, not yet.